Hello and welcome to another episode of Menu Heroes. I'm your host, Steven, and today we'll be talking about, as the title implies, the Rito from The Legend of Zelda. But first, we'd like to do some housekeeping real quick. As you know, we've only been active as a channel for a little under 2 months, so we're still trying to find our footing. We already have 11 subscribers to our YouTube channel, and while that doesn't sound like much, we're actually extremely surprised and excited that you all have decided to join us on this journey. Going forward, we've decided to switch our format to be more audio-focused. Basically, we're becoming a podcast. We've thought about this for a while, and decided it just made sense for the kind of content we make. Plus, this will allow us to reach more platforms, such as SoundCloud. As well as, this is just something you can put on in the background. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. The Legend of Zelda is an endlessly fascinating series. Besides having consistently solid gameplay, Zelda is also known for its split timeline and is a favorite subject of many theorists. Today we'll be talking about one of the more interesting species of Hyrule, the Rito. Now, as many fans of the series know, there are 2 sets of Ritos, those introduced in Wind Waker and those seen in Breath of the Wild. It's important to note that these are not the same species. The Great Sea Rito, or those introduced in Wind Waker, are descended from Zoras, while the Hylian Rito appear to be their own avian-based species. It's no secret that the Great Sea Rito evolved from Zoras. It's been a long-established detail in Zelda lore. No, what we'll be talking about today is why the Zora had to evolve into the Rito, how they went from an aquatic species to an avian species, and if such a transformation was scientifically possible. A common thought when talking about the Zora to Rito conversion is, wait a minute, there's water everywhere, and Zora thrive in water, right? Why would they need to evolve? I'm glad you asked, for there are quite a few reasons for this. A simple explanation is that the water is unnatural, as it was created by divine beings and is thus uninhabitable to Zoras. However, this interpretation raises more questions than it answers. Why would the gods create an ecosystem in which nothing but monsters could thrive? The whole point of flooding Hyrule was to protect her people. And yet the water is uninhabitable by a significant population? This doesn't add up and honestly feels like a cop-out. That said, the water is still uninhabitable, just not because it's divine. You see, when the Great Flood occurred, the many races moved to the mountaintops, and these mountains would later become the islands on which they reside. So it's fair to say that the water level changed drastically. We're not talking a couple inches here. This increase in level would also increase the temperature of the ocean, and the erosion such rainfall would cause over time would devastate the local ecosystems, most likely wiping out the Zora's main source of food, fish. In fact, the only life we see in the Great Sea are monsters and talking fish, none of which are Zora delicacies. So it's less that the water itself was unnatural and more that the water level was unnatural. Obviously, they had to get their food from somewhere, and they eventually ended up growing beaks to better retrieve their meals, and wings to fly around in order to scavenge. But Steven, I hear you saying, Zoras have scales and Ritos don't. Did they just magically sprout rings and a beak one day? And in a series that relies heavily on magic, the simple answer would be yes. I mean, they didn't start out with beaks. Over the course of a century, natural selection ran its course. What starts as a genetic anomaly becomes a desirable advantage. Those with desirable traits that could ensure the species' survival produced offspring, and those offspring went on to produce more offspring, and the cycle continued until they became the scaleless, beak-touting race we see today. As for the wings, we learn in Wind Waker that the Rito aren't born with the capability of flight, but rather receive the ability to do so after obtaining a scale from the sky spirit, Velu. If the use of a scale sounds familiar, that's because it is. Like the Zoras scale from Ocarina of Time, which gives Link the ability to dive deeper and breathe underwater for a longer duration of time, the Dragon scale from Valoo allows the Rito to fly. So now we know why and how the Rito turned from merfolk to birdfolk. What do we do with this information? Honestly, I don't know. I didn't make this to prove anything, but just as a vehicle to talk about a subject I found interesting. Zelda lore is fascinating to me, and I enjoy theorizing and piecing together how stuff works in its world. Magic is the easy explanation, but not always the satisfying one. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Until then, this is Menu here.